Europe is waking up. More and more countries are shifting from nationalism to a full-blown civilizationalism, recognizing that saving their nation requires saving their continent from a foreign invasion. And one country, perhaps the most unlikely of them all, is taking the lead. They're rewriting the entire European playbook on immigration, and once you see who's behind it, you're going to understand exactly why the rest of the continent is scrambling to catch up. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, here to help you make sense of the madness with breaking news and analysis you're not going to get anywhere else. So you know what to do. Make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. Denmark, long recognized as one of the world's most tolerant, generous, and progressive societies. A nation built on open borders, cradle-to-grave welfare, and an unwavering commitment to multiculturalism and human rights. That is, until now. This week, the Danish government has just unveiled proposals to ban burqas and niqabs all across their schools and universities nationwide, extending a public face covering ban that's been in effect since 2018. Immigration and Integration Minister Rasmus Stoklund put it bluntly, quote, "Burqas, niqabs, and other clothing that hides people's faces have no place in a Danish classroom." Now, Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has been pushing this ban since last year, and she's pairing it up with a concerted effort to eliminate prayer rooms from schools and universities entirely, arguing that they create a breeding ground for discrimination and pressure rather than inclusiveness. Now, the recommendation actually came from a former government's Women's Rights Commission, which warned that educational institutions needed to be shielded from systems that enable honor-based violence and social control. Anyone caught repeatedly violating the existing public ban already faces significant fines of up to 10,000 kroner. That's about $1,600. And that same penalty structure is now extending straight into the classroom. Now, astonishingly, what's so shocking for the European political elite is that this effort to ban the burqa isn't coming from the Danish right wing. This isn't coming from the Danish People's Party, which is their patriot right party, their populist right party. As you just heard, it's coming from women's groups. It's coming from their left wing. It's coming specifically from their center-left Social Democrat Party. Mette Frederiksen is widely considered a leftist, but even she is leading the charge to crack down on what she is explicitly calling alien cultural practices and norms that are an affront to Danish culture. And she's hardly alone. She, in fact, is increasingly the face of a unified Danish front on both the political left and right that is going full Gandalf, declaring, "You shall not pass," to Islamic cultural norms. For example, for the last several years, Denmark has quietly been running what it calls its parallel societies law. It was originally branded the Ghetto Law, which ranks and targets neighborhoods based on immigrant concentration, income, education, and crime, subjecting residents in those zones to double punishments for certain crimes and mandatory weekly daycare for children as young as 1, specifically to instill Danish language and cultural values. Now, make sure you get that. Again, I want this to hit you. This is a left-wing government that is cracking down on immigrant communities, mostly Muslim communities, forcing their children as young as 1 year old living in these designated ghettos to attend mandatory daycare for 25 hours per week. Now, the stated goal was cultural integration, to teach them liberal values. Toddlers were taught the Danish language. They were exposed to Danish values, traditions, democratic norms, gender equality. Parents who refuse to comply face the loss of all of their welfare benefits. In effect, the state compelled families to place their youngest children into government-run cultural programs. Now, in December of last year, the European Court of Justice ruled that the law could constitute direct ethnic discrimination, sent it back to Danish courts, to be reconsidered. And you'd think that ruling would force Denmark perhaps to soften their stance on all of this. Well, as you can see, it didn't. If anything, Denmark just doubled down in the most direct way possible. It's now moving to further expand their public ban on the burqa all throughout their educational institutions. Denmark's government, keep in mind, Denmark's left-wing government isn't backing down. And that tells you something very important. This isn't about optics for Copenhagen. It's about a country that has decided at the highest levels of its government, on both their political left as well as right, that cultural assimilation takes precedence over multicultural accommodation. And the statistics behind the doubling down, the data that's driving it, is going to absolutely shock you. But first, before you do anything else, I want you to go right now to turleytraining.com, because we're living through a time when a lot of people are beginning to realize something very important. The old economic system, the one that told you to work harder, grind longer, right? Depend on institutions that frankly don't have your best interests in mind, it's starting to break down. And you see it everywhere. Inflation, instability, and a growing sense that the system is increasingly designed for the benefit of a very small group at the very top. And whenever we see moments like this historically, something interesting happens, because ordinary people begin looking for ways to create independence from the system rather than depend on it, which is exactly why I want to invite you to a free training from someone I know personally, a good friend of mine named Ryan, who's been quietly building what he calls the perfect lifestyle business that takes advantage of the new hidden economy. And what's fascinating about it is that it's probably not what you think of when you hear the term online business, right? In fact, when he first explained it to me, I mean, I'll be honest, it sounded a little weird. But then he showed me the results, and I immediately got excited because it's working so well right now in 2026. And the part that really caught my attention is that it takes him less than 30 minutes a day to actually run and operate. And the best part is it's so different from a lot of other online businesses out there because there's no advertising to run. There's no social media marketing to worry about, no employees to hire, no inventory to buy or websites to build. I mean, it's amazing stuff. You don't need any technical background to get started. And this hidden economy lifestyle business is something you can learn and apply in just a few hours a week. So I asked Ryan to break this all down for you step by step, and we're hosting a free private training where you can see exactly how this works. So if you want to see how this hidden economy works and decide for yourself if this is the right strategy for you, go to turleytraining.com and reserve your spot right now, because you already know the world is changing. More people are stepping outside the system, not by chance, but by choice. And this is one of those opportunities to do exactly that. Learn more at turleytraining.com. Here's the number that tells you everything about how far Denmark has taken this overall approach. Asylum approvals hit a historic low in 2025, with just 839 applications approved out of just a few thousand submitted through November. That few thousand was the lowest total of submissions in decades under what officials openly call a zero refugee policy. Compare that to the 21,000 plus asylum applications that Denmark received back in 2015 during the height of the European migration crisis. This is a nation that's gone from being overwhelmed by mass migration to essentially shutting the door on it entirely. And what we have to appreciate here is that Denmark spent decades recruiting guest workers from Turkey and Pakistan to fill labor shortages after World War II, workers who were expected, in fairness, to eventually go home, but many never did. In 1980, immigrants made up just 2.6% of Denmark's population, 2.6%. By 2025, that number exploded to nearly 14%, with another 4% being Danish-born children of immigrants. So we're talking a total of more like 20%, and the outcomes were brutal by the numbers. So if immigrants made up roughly 14% of Denmark's population, they at the same time accounted for over 30% of violent crime convictions. Non-Western male migrants had a crime rate roughly 3 times that of native Danish men, and Somali nationals specifically, they had a conviction rate of 114 per 1,000 residents compared to just 12 for ethnic Danes. On top of that, Denmark's Ministry of Finance found non-Western immigrants and their children created a net fiscal cost of 31 billion kroner in a single year. That's about 4.2 billion USD. And a 2025 study found that over 60% of Denmark's housing price growth since 1999 could be traced directly back to immigration-driven population growth. This is why cracking down on immigration in general and Islamic parallel societies in particular simply isn't controversial anymore in Denmark. Both the left and the right have concluded that this experiment in multiculturalism simply did not work. It has ironically undermined the very liberal values that made that multicultural experiment possible in the first place. Denmark's logic here is brutally simple. You can have an open border immigration policy, or you can have a generous, liberal, cradle-to-grave welfare state, but you can't have both. You simply can't have both. That single insight is why even Denmark's political left has slammed the door on migration to protect Denmark's Scandinavian social model. Denmark's transformation is the clearest case study anywhere in the West of what happens when a generous welfare state collides head-on with mass migration from culturally incompatible populations. Denmark tried integration for decades. They judged it a failure by the numbers, and then they pivoted hard in a completely different direction, and it's now taking that pivot straight into the classroom. The doors that stood open in Denmark for generations are now slamming shut, and that echo is being heard from London to Stockholm to Rome. So again, keep your eyes on Denmark, because whatever direction this small Scandinavian nation takes next, the rest of Europe is likely to follow.